Queen Victoria is often remembered as the powerful monarch who ruled Britain for more than 63 years. But away from the throne, she was also the mother of 9 children. Those 9 sons and daughters would grow up to marry into royal families all across Europe, earning Victoria the nickname the Grandmother of Europe. By the beginning of the 20th century, almost every major royal family in Europe was connected to her. But the lives of Victoria's children were not as glamorous as they may seem. Some were happy, some were deeply miserable. One became king, one became German empress, another suffered from illness and loneliness. Several of them ended up trapped in unhappy marriages. And in a strange twist of history, Queen Victoria's children and grandchildren would eventually find themselves on opposite sides of the First World War. So, who were Queen Victoria's 9 children, and what happened to each of them? 1. Victoria, Princess Royal. The first child of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert was born in 1940. She was named Victoria, though her family called her Vicky. As the eldest child, Vicky was very close to her father, Prince Albert. Albert believed that she was extremely intelligent, and he gave her a serious education. She learned languages, history, politics, and philosophy. In many ways, she was raised more like a future ruler than like a typical princess. When she was only 17 years old, she married Prince Frederick of Prussia. At first, this seemed like the perfect match. Frederick was intelligent, kind, and liberal-minded. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert hoped that Vicky and Frederick would help make Germany more modern and democratic. But there was one problem. Frederick's family, especially his father and the powerful German politicians around him, were much more conservative. Vicky struggled to fit in at the Prussian court. Many Germans thought she was too English, while some in Britain thought she had become too German. Eventually, Frederick became Emperor of Germany in 1888, but he was already dying from throat cancer. He ruled for only 99 days before he died. That meant that Vicky's son became the new German emperor, Kaiser Wilhelm II. The tragedy was that Wilhelm and his mother did not get along. He disliked her liberal ideas and blamed her for trying to make him too English. As emperor, Wilhelm took Germany in a much more aggressive direction. Vicky spent the final years of her life watching her son undo everything she and her father had hoped for. Number 2. Albert Edward, the future King Edward VII. Queen Victoria's second child, born in 1841, was Albert Edward. In the family, he was known as Bertie. Unlike his older sister, Bertie was not especially academic. Prince Albert tried very hard to educate him, but Bertie found studying boring. He preferred horse racing, parties, hunting, and socializing. Queen Victoria often thought that Bertie was lazy and irresponsible. Prince Albert was also disappointed in him. Then, in 1861, Bertie was involved in a small scandal involving an actress. Prince Albert traveled in poor weather to speak with him. Shortly afterward, Albert became ill and died. Queen Victoria never completely forgave Bertie. For the rest of her life, she believed that the stress of Bertie's behavior had helped kill his father. Bertie married Princess Alexandra of Denmark in 1863. Alexandra was beautiful and very popular, and the two had 6 children. However, Bertie was not a faithful husband. He had many affairs throughout his marriage. For decades, Bertie had to wait while his mother remained on the throne. By the time he finally became King Edward VII in 1901, he was already 59 years old. Many people expected him to be a weak king. Instead, he surprised everyone. Edward VII turned out to be an excellent diplomat. He was charming, friendly, and good at building relations with other European countries. His reign was short, lasting only 9 years, but he helped improve Britain's relations with France and other nations. Ironically, the son Queen Victoria thought least suited to rule became one of Britain's most successful kings. 3. Princess Alice. Queen Victoria's third child, Alice, was born in 1843. Alice was perhaps the kindest and most caring of all Victoria's children. She was gentle, sensitive, and very close to both her mother and father. When Prince Albert died in 1861, it was Alice who comforted Queen Victoria through her grief. Alice married Prince Louis of Hesse, the German prince. The marriage began happily, but life soon became difficult. They had 7 children, but the family faced constant financial problems and illness. Alice became known for caring for wounded soldiers during the Austro-Prussian War. She worked in hospitals and became interested in nursing, inspired by Florence Nightingale. Then tragedy struck. In 1878, a terrible outbreak of diphtheria spread through the family. Several of Alice's children became sick. One of her daughters, little Princess Marie, died. Alice was heartbroken. Shortly afterward, she caught the disease herself. On December 14, 1878, the exact anniversary of Prince Albert's death, Princess Alice died at the age of only 35. But Alice's story had one more surprising chapter. Her daughter, Alix of Hesse, would later marry Tsar Nicholas II of Russia and become Empress Alexandra of Russia. That means Queen Victoria's granddaughter would one day become the last Empress of Russia and would be killed during the Russian Revolution. 4. Prince Alfred. The fourth child was Prince Alfred, born in 1844. Alfred was very different from his older brother Bertie. He was serious, disciplined, and loved the Navy. As a young man, Alfred joined the Royal Navy and traveled all over the world. In fact, he became the first member of the British royal family ever to visit Australia. He was popular with the public and was often seen as one of Queen Victoria's most successful children. In 1874, Alfred married Grand Duchess Maria of Russia, the daughter of Tsar Alexander II. But this marriage was not especially happy. Maria looked down on Britain and often argued with Alfred. She thought she deserved a higher rank than the other members of the British royal family because she was the daughter of a czar. Later, Alfred inherited the title of Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha in Germany after the death of his uncle. Yet even Alfred's life was marked by tragedy. His only son, also named Alfred, became involved in scandal and reportedly shot himself during his parents' silver wedding anniversary celebrations. He died soon afterward. Prince Alfred himself died in 1900, only a year before Queen Victoria. 5. Princess Helena. Princess Helena, born in 1846, was Queen Victoria's 5th child. Helena was loyal, practical, and perhaps the least dramatic of the siblings. Unlike some of her brothers and sisters, she remained close to her mother for most of her life. Queen Victoria relied heavily on Helena, especially after Prince Albert died. In 1866, Helena married Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein. Queen Victoria wanted Helena to stay nearby, so the couple lived close to the Queen for many years. Helena often acted almost like her mother's assistant. She helped organize Queen Victoria's correspondence and supported various charities. Helena was especially interested in nursing and health care. She worked with nursing organizations and supported the British Red Cross. Although Helena's life was quieter than those of her siblings, she remained one of the most dependable members of the family. 6. Princess Louise. Princess Louise, born in 1848, was probably the most unusual and rebellious of Queen Victoria's daughters. Louise was artistic, independent, and determined to live life on her own terms. She loved painting and sculpture, and even studied art professionally, something that was very unusual for a princess at the time.
In 1871, she shocked society by marrying John Campbell, the Marquis of Lorne. Why was that shocking? Because unlike her brothers and sisters, Louise did not marry a foreign prince, she married a British nobleman. It was the first time in centuries that a daughter of a British monarch had married a commoner, well, not an ordinary commoner, but someone who was not royal. The marriage was never especially happy.
Louise and John spent long periods apart.
And there were constant rumors that both of them had relationships with other people. Louise never had children. However, she became one of the best-known royal women of her time because of her personality. She was witty, fashionable, and sometimes scandalous. She also became famous for her artwork. In fact, one of the statues of Queen Victoria in London was designed by Louise herself.
7. Prince Arthur. The seventh child, Prince Arthur, was born in 1850. Arthur was one of Queen Victoria's favorite sons. He was hardworking, serious, and dependable. Like his brother Alfred, Arthur chose a military career. He served in the British Army and spent many years as a soldier. In 1879, he married Princess Louise Margaret of Prussia. Arthur had a successful military career and eventually became a field marshal. Perhaps his most famous role came later when he served as Governor-General of Canada from 1911 to 1916. The Canadians liked him very much, and he became one of the most respected royal figures in the British Empire. Arthur was also the last surviving son of Queen Victoria. He lived until 1942, meaning that he saw not only the First World War, but also part of the Second World War. 8. Prince Leopold. Prince Leopold, born in 1853, had perhaps the saddest life of all Queen Victoria's children. Leopold was intelligent, artistic, and sensitive, but he suffered from hemophilia, a disease that prevents blood from clotting properly. Today, doctors understand hemophilia much better, but in the 1800s it was extremely dangerous. Queen Victoria was the first known carrier of the disease, and she passed it on to Leopold and to some of her daughters, who then passed it into other royal families. Because of his illness, Leopold was often treated differently from his brothers. He was not allowed to join the army or live the adventurous life he wanted. Still, Leopold was clever and well-educated. He attended Oxford University and became interested in literature and the arts. For many years, Queen Victoria kept him close to her, perhaps because she worried about his health. Finally, at the age of 30, Leopold married Princess Helena of Waldeck and Pyrmont. For a brief time, he seemed happy. But only 2 years later, in 1884, Leopold slipped and injured himself while staying in France. Because of his hemophilia, the injury caused severe internal bleeding. He died at the age of just 30. 9. Princess Beatrice. The youngest child of Queen Victoria was Princess Beatrice, born in 1857. Beatrice was Queen Victoria's favorite daughter. By the time Beatrice was born, Queen Victoria was older and more protective than she had been with her earlier children. After Prince Albert died, Queen Victoria became extremely dependent on Beatrice. In fact, Victoria did not want Beatrice to marry at all. She wanted her youngest daughter to stay with her forever. But Beatrice fell in love with Prince Henry of Battenberg. At first, Queen Victoria was furious. She refused to speak to Beatrice for months. Eventually, however, she agreed to the marriage, but only on one condition. Beatrice and Henry had to continue living with her. They married in 1885. Beatrice spent much of her life acting as her mother's companion and secretary. When Queen Victoria died in 1901, it was Beatrice who inherited many of her private papers and diaries. In fact, Beatrice spent decades editing her mother's journals. Unfortunately, she destroyed many of the original entries, meaning historians will never know exactly what Queen Victoria really wrote. Beatrice lived until 1942, making her the last surviving child of Queen Victoria.